every Overwatch hero from easiest to hardest, which will be defined on skill ceiling. Skill ceiling is how difficult a hero is to master to a high level. In other words, how hard is it to play the hero close to perfection. Please do not leave a dumb comment because you forgot what skill ceiling meant or you're just gonna ignore it. Anyways, let's get into it. In F tier, I actually don't have any heroes. I don't think a single hero in this game is easy to master. Easy to pick up and play? For sure, but that's skill floor we're talking about. This is skill ceiling. In E tier, I have Tourbillon to begin with. The only part of his kit that's hard to master is consistently landing shots and maybe using your Molten Core in creative ways. Aside from that, the rest of Torb's kit kinda does the work itself. Turret a flank or an angle, overload during moments of aggression, and use the shotgun up close against tanks. After Torb, I have Reaper. Now this is before his rework coming into Season 12, so this is definitely gonna be subject to change. However, Reaper is currently one of the simplest heroes in the game, and he's pretty one-dimensional. You either frontline and shred tanks, or you flank with your CP. Next up, I have Bastion. Yeah, I don't think he's that hard to master at all really. Not piss easy, no hero is, but his ultimate is really easy to master, and while not easy, his kit is very simple. You turret form when your team wants to go in, it's not that difficult. Ending off the E tier, I have Lifeweaver. Now this guy doesn't just have a skill floor lower than the Mariana Trench, but he also doesn't have much to master about his kit. The most important thing to Lifeweaver is making sure you rotate dynamically so you have LOS to your team, which is a skill that applies to most supports. Your heal is auto-lock, your grip is auto-lock, you have more HP than most supports, you have a free dash that gives you 50 HP, and you have a platform as a get out of jail free card. You don't even have the movement of Mercy to make up for the lack of mechanical skill in the rest of your kits. Now on the D tier, with heroes that are fairly easy to master, but not piss easy, I have Moira. I initially had her in F tier in my video last year, and I think I didn't give credit to Moira's TikTok flanking playstyle. Mechanics wise, Moira is of course not that difficult, but it legitimately requires great game sense to decide when and how to take duels on Moira. She's not just a heal bot, even though she definitely can be. After Moira, I have Hog. Hitting the hook consistently is the only reason why Hog is a 2 out of 4 and not anything below. The rest of his kit and even his playstyles aren't anything too complex to master either. Next up in D tier, I have Orisa. Orisa's rework mainly addressed her issue of being too boring to play, but it didn't really add that much complexity to her kits. The main element raising her skill ceiling is her Javelin, and I won't lie, it is a key defining aspect that will separate higher level Orisas. But aside from that, there's not too much more to actually master. Next up I have Ramattra, who's here for similar reasons. Your ultimate isn't that hard to master in terms of actually using it, your Vortex isn't that hard to master, you just pop it when your team's going in, and neither is your shield. The only thing is maybe landing your pummels against small hitbox targets, as well as other tank fundamentals, but barring that, there's a reason why top level Van players do look very similar. In the penultimate place in D tier, I have Mercy. Now yes, I know you don't need to aim on Mercy, but my ultimate point is that while Mercy is a very easy hero to get into, she's actually fairly challenging to actually master. You try playing Mercy against Somber Traitor Dive and tell me that shit is easy. The macro knowledge and awareness required to pull this hero off in higher elo is legitimately no slouch. The only reason why she isn't any higher is again because of mechanics, and also because her skill set isn't mutually exclusive to other main supports. For example, awareness is a skill that applies to any hero. Mercy specifically hasn't got that much to actually master, barring her movement tech. Ending off the D tier, I have Soldier. Honestly, a tracking intensive hero shouldn't really be down this low, but Soldier's macro and broader playstyle are just so much easier to actually master. There's a reason why he's a ranked hero that you barely see in team play. You just sprint to an angle, shoot your gun, use your cooldowns, and then sprint away. Not to mention, your ultimate is a literal aimbot. If you want to play hitscan, he's the easiest option in my opinion. Both in terms of skill floor and skill ceiling actually. Starting off the C tier is Ashe. Her squishiness and fragility is what makes her just that bit harder to play when compared to something like Soldier. Her ultimate is still pretty easy to use, but it is slightly harder to master, and positionally, she does get punished that extra bit more. After Ashe, I have Brigitte. As a former Brigitte main myself, I can say that her skill ceiling is fairly high. The main thing that raises it is of course her positioning. Playing Brig against Dive is very hard to master, and playing Brig into Ryan comps is also very hard to master. Whipshot is also added mechanics that a hero like Mercy doesn't really have, and the reason why she isn't any higher is that mechanically speaking, there are more supports with more food on their plate. The last hero in the C tier is Junker Queen. The hardest part to master on Queen, and what makes up the bulk of her skill ceiling, is knife accuracy. A lot of Queens need to be treating it like a hog hook. Of course, compared to Arisa with Javelin, Ram with Pummels, and Hog with Hook, there is additional tank macro to Queen when it comes down to concepts like push and pull, and ensuring you get value against Kiriko comps with your ultimates. You're also a lot more squishy compared to those 3 tanks, meaning that positionally, there's that extra bit of skill ceiling to make sure you don't get ran on, and to make sure you don't get forced out early. Entering the B tier, I have Venture. I think Venture is holistically a fairly difficult hero to master. Their ultimate isn't straightforward to get value out of, they have multiple different playstyles that you need to switch between on the fly, and it can be hard hitting your shots against mobile squishy targets. Believe it or not, this isn't just the annoying rat hero. After Venture, I have Mauga. Now, I know there's going to be actual gold players watching this rage typing in the comments saying, Mauga is so easy, you just hold M1 and M2 on the enemy tank. But again, this tier list is skill ceiling, not floor. I have to say this multiple times because there are people with room temperature IQs actually watching this. Mauga's ceiling does come from a skill set that isn't specific to him, for example stuff like ebb and flow, and actually tracking squishy targets, but I think they're more important on Mauga. Especially stuff like rotations, cooldown usage, especially your cardiac overdrive, it's just quite easy to tell the difference between high level Mauga players. Tread for example against SSG, you could really see Tread's skill set when playing into Hardy and that macro knowledge of being able to kite out certain ultimates. Gold players won't know anything I just said, which is why they're typing bullshit in my comment section, but if you've been following me for a decent time, you'll know how important those concepts are and how they're not easy to master at all. Next up is Cassidy. His flexibility in a number of different compositions, how important landing each shot is, as well as getting actual value out of his high noon, drag Cassidy into the B tier. Honestly, I could see an argument for him being lower, but his ultimate in my opinion is quite hard to master compared to something like Ash's Bob. After I have Zarya. Believe it or not, the hardest part of mastering Zarya is being able to stay alive. You are the squishiest ground tank in the game, with no armor and bubbles that pop instantly if you're not careful. Playing Zarya into Dive is hard to master, definitely harder than Queen, which is why Zarya is above Queen. Playing Zarya into Mei comps is also hard to master. Bubbling at the right time is again also hard to master. Therefore, I think Zarya more than earns a spot in the B tier here. After Zarya, I have Sojourn. Not gonna lie, that hitbox change in Season 9, as well as that big nerf to Sojourn's railgun, which benefits bad players, drops her a whole tier from my original skill ceiling list. It still takes a lot to dome targets in the head and to move to the correct positions, but it's not as hard as it once was. After Sojourn, I have Illari. Maybe I'm putting Sojourn and Illari next to each other because they were commonly played in Pro League in the past, but yeah. Illari is slightly above Sojourn because you do have a bit more to manage in terms of healing, pylon placement, and ult usage. After Illari, I have Juno actually. Now Juno isn't fully released yet during the making of this video, but we did get a 3-day trial, and I think that should be enough information to make an educated guess on their ceiling. While Juno can't headshot on their primary fire, I don't see that as a massive issue considering the hitbox on their shots are already small. Shot Candy did a funny comparison with Mercy there. They also have no self-heal, an incredible amount of mobility, and a great ceiling for decision making in terms of positioning and cooldown usage. I'm not putting Juno any higher because she isn't as mechanically demanding as other heroes, and positionally, I would still say heroes like Zen are harder to master. After Juno, I have Junkrat. I put Junkrat a lot lower in my previous tier list for basically no reason. Now it is very easy to get some value out of Junkrat because he is the funny spam character, but it's surprisingly challenging to actually master the guy. Decent Junkrat players can get the one-shot combo off, but playing Junkrat against comps that try to hard counter you, and doing that on suboptimal maps, the reason why he's not any higher is because in situations where you're actually going to play Junkrat in team play, which is against those Reinhardt Lucio comps, He's actually pretty easy to play and he's not hard to master there at all. Ryan's up next, and I was thinking about putting him lower, but it's Reinhardt's decision making that I think raises him to this level. Knowing how to play and master that dive-out playstyle isn't for the faint of heart, alongside all the other tidbits of micro that you need to know on the hero. With that being said, his macro skill set isn't too indifferent to the other ground tanks, but there's certainly some difficulty that comes with his mastery, especially when trying to make him work in suboptimal situations. After Ryan, I have Mei. By far the hardest part to master with Mei is her ice wall, which is why she's this high up. She's also recently had the size on her icicles reduced in exchange for a bit more damage, slightly increasing her ceiling as well. There's a reason why you don't see Mei that often, and that's because it's bloody hard to play her since her wall isn't straightforward to get value out of. In team play, I'd still say other heroes are a bit harder to master, but don't sleep on Mei. After Mei, I have Symmetra, who's in a similar situation to her, but instead of wall, it's with TP. There's easily a dozen different uses with TP, from doing quirky rotations, to dueling certain heroes, to TP bombing, the whole lot of it. The reason why she isn't higher is because, similar to Junkrat, when you're playing her in team play, especially in Brawl Mirrors, she's often just used for a beam, which is just not hard to master at all. You hold down M1 and you press W, that is not hard to master at all. Next up, I have Pharah. Now, of course she didn't have the rework when I made this tier list a year ago, and I think the rework increases her ceiling for the better. The mobility makes rotations even more useful and a more central part of her kit. Barrage is still a hard ultimate to consistently get value out of, and cover usage is still incredibly difficult on the hero. The reason why she isn't any higher is because her weapon isn't the most mechanically demanding thing on the planet. Next up, I have Hanzo. Especially considering he can't get one shot anymore, getting value out of Hanzo, especially without a pocket, is harder than ever. I think people like Arge do show off Hanzo's skill ceiling because the overwhelming majority of Hanzo players can't hit the shots that he does. After Hanzo, I have Doomfist. I was very tempted to put Doom higher up because there are insane Doom players like Gushui that do exist. But looking at it more holistically, his skill ceiling was reduced not just from Overwatch 1, but also from the Overwatch 2 beta. The tech, mechanics and movement are honestly not even the hardest part of his kit to master. It's actually knowing how not to feed, because at the highest level, a slightly suboptimal engage can lead to death. Next up, I have Echo. Echo's one of those heroes that have a little bit of everything with their kit that all leads up to a fairly difficult hero to master. Playing Echo in that broady Malga comp, playing Echo into dive, playing Echo with double flex backlines. She certainly has that macro skill ceiling going for her. It's also not easy hitting her tri-shots or her stickies while you're dueling. And ending off the B tier, I have Ana. To put it simply, I think Ana has the same hurdles as a hero like Zen, but without the failsafes of a sleep dart, self-heal or annoying ass hitbox. Before I continue, just want to quickly plug my coaching. It's been promoted by Spilo, so that's how you know it's good. Check the top link in the description for more details. Now entering the A tier, I have Sombra. Now, I know some of you brainlets think Sombra is easy, but once again, this is a tier list on skill ceiling, not floor. Yes, you can just hold M1 on tanks and farm them, but actually playing and mastering Sombra at the highest level is a feat that only a handful of players can actually do. I think Lip's Sombra from last year during the summer was some of the most complex and best Sombra gameplay that trickled down a lot of concepts to the rest of the player base, and it showed off her ceiling. After Sombra, I have D.Va, one of the most complex heroes in the game sense wise. Knowing how and when to peel, dive, duel, brawl, bunker, control, there's just so much to her kits. The only thing preventing her from climbing up is her mechanics, which aren't easy, but again, they're not the hardest thing either. After D.Va, I have Winston. Yes, he might not be the most mechanical tank in the game, but his ultimate is probably top 3 hardest ultimates to master. Not to mention he requires an insane amount of positional attention to detail. Jump placement, jump timing, your actual target, having a planned escape, your cover usage while you're jumping in, bubble dancing, as well as having an adept knowledge of playing Winston into your so-called countercomps. After Winston, I have Baptiste. If you want to see skill ceiling, look at Landon. Even the second best Baptiste in EU, being Ghost, isn't that close to Landon's capability, and that's because of how mechanically demanding Baptiste is. Couple that in with positioning and knowing how to distance and move yourself when you're playing against dive comps, Bap is an easy A tier. After Bap, I have Sigma. Again, similar to Landon, look at Vistola, particularly in the Overwatch World Cup last year. He really showed off the skill ceiling of that character, and I think the fact that that really pushes Sigma into the A tier is knowing how to play Sigma into dive comps. Landing hyperspheres onto Tracers and Genjis consistently is no small feat, but if you can do it, you will likely be one of the best Sigma players in the world. After Sigma, I have Lucio. Most of his skill cap is obviously mechanical, his gun isn't easy to use and to land shots with, and his wall ride isn't easy to master either. Funny Astro shows off that ceiling perfectly, but he's also got that playstyle complexity too. I've coached multiple Grandmaster Lucios, and knowing which playstyle to switch to in the middle of the fight, and actually doing that playstyle well, is incredibly difficult. Just after Lucio, I have Widowmaker. Of course, when you have a one-shot sniper hero in any game, the skill cap is going to be fairly high. But again, just like the heroes in this tier, the best Widows not only have the aim, but the brain too. Flank timing, knowing when to take a duel and when not to, avoiding ego peaks, hitting shots into squishies, and playing this hero on maps that don't suit you are all factors that drastically increase Widow's skill ceiling. After Widow, I have Zen. Now Zen can be an easy hero. If you're playing him into a Lucio Ryan comp, it's actually fairly easy. But playing Zen into dive might be one of the hardest things to do in the game. Mix that in with being able to hit your shots and manage your Discord orbs well, and you have a pretty good argument for Zen being this high up. After Zen is Genji. There's not a single aspect in Genji's kit that is easy to master. You have pretty much an infinite skill ceiling mechanically, because landing those burst damage combos and those shurikens consistently is no small feat. There's also the game sense layer in mastering your blade, and positional complexity in playing aggressive but safe. Genji is a very easy A tier. After Genji is Bull. Bull's placement here is obvious. The mechanics and movement are without a doubt the highest in the tank category. The buff he also got to his grapple, allowing him to stay high up on surfaces, also add on a skill ceiling, and he's also fairly complex macro wise. There's a lot of things to master on Bull, and I think that's at least part of the reason why you see so few tank players specialize on Bull. Ending off the A tier, I have Kiriko. With how much flack she gets for being able to TP through walls and burst steal people with Suzu, she also gets a very high skill ceiling because of it. You need positional discipline to not get your TP forced out, you need to time your Suzus perfectly, especially if you're caught in something like a Sigma Flux, and your kunai are one of the hardest support primaries to hit. There's also plenty of macro complexity to Kiriko, understanding the ebb and flow with your Kitsune Rush, understanding how and when to adapt playstyles into different comps. For example, playing Kiriko into dive is pretty challenging to master. She's probably the support in the game with the most compositional, positional, and mechanical depth. Obviously, you can just play Healbot Kiriko, but that's to do with skill floor and value floor, which is not what this video is about. Now in the S tier, who else could you expect? It's Tracer. Tracer has every box ticked off. You want mechanics and movement? Well, get ready to learn blink management, terrain usage, trigger discipline, pulse bomb accuracy, tracking, and reload management. You want macro? Just look at Pro League. Learning how to play Tracer with different backlines, like we saw with Bleed Esports and Ents, and not just knowing what your own win condition is, but your own team's. That Bleed Esports and Ents game on Colosseo, for example, the backlines are drastically different, and that changes how you play Tracer. She also has a suboptimal matchups too. I think Venture really added an extra layer in terms of how you approach a hero who's built to outduel you. Anyways, that's it for the video. As always, let me know your thoughts down below, and until next time.